Good morning, students. Miss Nicole is here. We're going to talk about more division today. We are finishing up our unit, our 3.7 division. This is our lesson series 3, day 2. This is problems with unknowns. So our learning target, our first learning target is I can turn division stories into multiplication stories. Our second learning target, I understand relationships between division and multiplication. So these are the learning targets that we are going to be focusing on today and our success criteria. So this is how we will determine this. So we will know that we are able to turn division stories into multiplication stories and that we understand the relationship between the division and the multiplication by checking off this list. So here's our list, right? So I will know when I am successful when I make a visual and an equation to match. I know when I will know I am successful when I make my multiplication story match my division story, right? So, how do we go about writing an equation that will represent our math story? So, if we have a math story, how do we go about writing that in an equation, right? So let's do that together. Sometimes I love that noise, and then sometimes I'm like, whoa, that like really like pesters me. It really frustrates me. That word pester. Sometimes that word is kind of strange, but it's like when somebody draws on a chalkboard. If you're ever in a classroom with a chalkboard, sometimes that like screeching noise can be like, ah. So those things can kind of trigger us sometimes. So let's go back to it. So how do we write an equation from our math story, right? So let's write down, let me come up with a story for today. I have a whole bunch of markers and pencils in my hand. I love my red, black, and green markers. So as I'm doing this, I think I'm going to use a different number though. I'm going to use 16. So let's say I have 16 pencils or markers. We'll use pencils in this case, right? So I have 16 pencils. There's some students. I don't know how many students there are. So when we go back to our problems with the unknowns, right? So this is a problem with an unknown. So we know that we have 16 pencils. What we're trying to find out is what, right? So we have an unknown number of students. So that's an unknown number of students. And let's see, so they get 2 pencils each. Let's say they get 2 each, right? So here's our story problem. So we have 16 pencils. We have some students, the number is unknown, they get 2 pencils each, right? So let's find out let's write this out. Let's draw a picture that matches that story, and then let's write an equation that will match it. So that's the first thing we're going to do. So if I have 16 pencils, I'm going to use tally marks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? So here's my 16 pencils. This is my representation or my visual. So here's 16 pencils here. I know that each student should be getting 2 pencils each. So I can look at that as a grouping. I can say, okay, if I have 16 here, I know that 2 pencils each, I'm going to use my green marker here. I can say, okay, so there's 2 pencils for that student. Let's just keep grouping in equal groups. So there's 2, there's 2, there's 2 pencils, right? So here's 2 pencils each, and when we're done, we can find out how many groups we have. Right? So how many groups do we have here? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 groups. So that tells us that this would be 8 groups. Now, our second part of this, now that we have drawn a picture or a visual to represent our story, let's write an equation that matches it. So how would we write this in equation, right? So we know that here's 16. We know that 16, remember that's equals, we discovered that it was 8 groups of 2. So 16 equals 2. So this was, again, remember, this was our unknown. This was our unknown at first, right? And so at first, we were looking at this equation. We were trying to figure out what was this unknown number here. We discovered it, and we discovered that this here is an 8, right? So there would be 8 students. There's 16 pencils. 8 students would get 2 pencils each, right? Okay, let's 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 look at the relationship of multiplication and division a little bit more, right? Let's look at some other ways that we can write an equation and draw a visual to show us what our equation could look like, right? So let's do another one here. So I'm thinking, okay, so we know, again, this is our story problem right here, right? So this doesn't change. Story problem doesn't change. Let's look at a different way that we can write this that's different but similar, and then we can look at what's different and similar about it, okay? So we know, I'm gonna lift this up just a little bit. Excuse me. Again, that noise can kind of be like, ah. Okay, so let's do this again, okay? So we know that if we have 16 pencils, right? So again, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? We have 16 pencils, and we're looking at this. So there's what's another way that we can look at this? We can say, okay, again, I know that 16 pencils, don't know how many students, 2 pencils each. Another way that we could write this, we could look at it like, okay, once again, I'm grouping these into 2 because I know that each unknown is supposed to get 2. So here I am, I'm grouping again. So there's my third grouping, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, looks pretty similar to what I did before. The only difference is when I look at this, I see that yes, there's 16 of them, but I have divided it, right? So, or excuse me, I put this into 8 groups of 2. So I know that like 16 divided by 8 equals 2. I started off with 16. I divided them into 8 even groups, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I did that into 8 even groups of 2 pencils each. So I now know that this could also be written as this. So it can be written as 16 equals 8 times 2. It can be written as 16 divided by 8 equals 2. But it's the same, right? So same representation. It's just a different way to write it. Let's do a different way, right? So again, we know that we have 16, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? So we have this one here. What's another way that we can look at this? We can say, okay, well, I know that this is going to be in 2, right? So I'm going to put 2 of these aside for the first student. I'm going to put 2 of these aside for the second student. So this is 1 student. This is for 2 students. Ooh, I'm sorry. Let me use a different color. I apologize. I wish you could have told me, Miss Nicole, I can't see. Sorry about that. So this would be the first student, second student, right? So let's group this off. So here is the third one. Here's the fourth one. Okay, so here's that. So now I've given away pencils to 5 students. I still have some pencils left. So let's see how many students I can do. So 6. There's another group of 2. So that's the 7th group, or the 7th student. And here we are with 8. Okay, so another way that we can write this or look at this, right, is 16 divided by 2 equals 8, right? It's the same thing, right? Another way to look at this exact problem here would be to take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, taking those pencils and saying, okay, I'm going to split this in half. If I split this in half, I know that anything that's split in half is divided into 2, right? So if I have a piece of candy and I need to split it with my friend and there's only one piece, I know that we can tear it into half to get 2 pieces. So they get a piece and I get a piece. So what I'm going to do is I have these 16 pencils here, and I might think to myself, well, I know my family facts, so I might know that 8 plus 8 equals 16. I know that that's 8 plus 8, so I might just say, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I might put this in a group and then put these 8 in a group. So some students might look at that as there was 16 divided by 2 equals 8, right? So there's different ways to represent this, different ways to write our equations. And so let's try one more way to draw this out, visual, to represent our visual, as well as another way to write an equation, right? So let's go ahead and let's write this out, right? So if we're trying to figure out what is the unknown, and we know that we have 16 pencils, and we know that 2 students need each, what is another way that we could write this out, right? So we've seen here that we can write it as 16 equals 8 times 2. 16 divided by 8 equals 2. We see here that 16 divided by 2 equals 8. I think there's some other ways we can write this. Let's do this together. So we know we have 16 pencils. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, right? So we have 16 here. I think, again, I'm going to group these into 2 because I know that each student gets 2 pencils each. And that helps me because I don't know the unknown number. If I didn't know these other ways to write this, and I just had our story problem and I needed to draw a picture that matched my story, I might say, okay, I have 16 pencils, I have an unknown number, right? An unknown number of students, I know 2. So again, I'm just going to group it into 2, right? So I'm grouping these into 2. 2 pencils because that's what it says. It says 16 pencils, 2 each. So let's find out, right? So when I look at this, I am looking like, okay, well, this is 16, right? 16 equals, what is 16 equals 2 groups, or 2 times 8 groups, right? So there's 2, 1, 2 in there inside of each group. And then how many groups do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we had 8 groups, right? So with our story problem, we were able to see that we were able to draw a visual and have a representation of our math story, as well as write an equation that would match it. So let's go back to our success criteria, right? So our success criteria, I will know I am successful when I make a visual and an equation to match. We did that. we were able to look at our math problem, our math story, and we were able to come up with 4 different visuals, right? So we came up with 4 different visuals and equations to match. So let's go ahead and check that box off. We can get a big check mark for that one. Wait, let me put a little heart and a smiley face, and a smiley face, smiley face. Okay, cool. Heart and a smiley face goes a long way. So, second success criteria. So I will know I am successful when I make my multiplication story match my division story. Did we do that? Let's look back. So our multiplication story, does it match our division story? So here's our multiplication. 16 equals 8 times 2. 16 divided by 8 equals 2. So we can see here that the relationship between the multiplication and the division, right? We can see the relationship and understand that it's the same thing. Although it is different, it is in fact the same, right? So we can see here through our success criteria that we were able to focus on our learning targets, right? So what did we do today? We turned our division stories into multiplication stories. And now we understand the relationship, right, between our division and multiplication. We were able to go over our success criteria, and I forgot to check off this box. Don't forget to check off yours with a little cool design. There. I like to put happy faces on mine. So there we go, right? So we have our 3.7 division lesson series 3, day 2. I will go ahead and post an exit ticket, and that exit ticket will have a problem for you to try on your own. So you can try that. If you have any questions, make sure to ask. What else? If you want to edit it on the Google, you can go ahead and do that, or you can upload it and send it to Miss Nicole. You can send it to Miss Barber, or you can send it to Miss Ha. And again, if you have any questions about today's lesson, let us know so we can help you, okay? Have a great day, and we'll see you at during class this afternoon.